Richard Halden did not lower his voice. He did not step aside or wait for music to drown him out. In the middle of his son's wedding, in front of more than 100 guests, he pointed straight at me and shouted, "Leave now. My son does not want you here." The room froze, forks hovered in midair, conversations stalled, and the groom's eyes flicked away as if he wished he could disappear. I felt heat rise under my skin, but I kept my expression still. After 12 years working under Richard, I had learned that silence was sometimes the only armor I had. So I turned, walked out of the hall, and let the door fall shut behind me without a single word. My name is Alara Whitford. I have lived in Denver for most of my adult life, built my career block by block, and spent far too long believing loyalty would protect me from scenes like that one. As I crossed the parking lot, my hands trembled. Not from fear Richard had yelled before, but from the way his voice cracked. Desperation hid behind the anger, a sharp edge he had never shown in the office. I drove through the quiet streets toward Capitol Hill, the wedding lights shrinking in my rearview mirror. The humiliation stung, but something else pressed heavier on my chest. Richard's panic had not been about me being there. It had been about me seeing something, or someone. He needed hidden. By the time I reached my apartment, the question gnawed at me more than the humiliation. I barely slept, replaying the moment again and again, searching for the piece I was missing. The answer came the next morning. At 7:14, my phone rang. Richard's name lit the screen. I let it buzz twice before I picked up. "Alara," he said, breathless. "I need the audit files, all of them." The voice I heard was not the same man who had thrown me out the night before. This one sounded cornered. I sat down, gripping the phone. "Why now, Richard?" His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said, and I knew the real story had only just begun. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It reflects the kinds of power struggles, workplace injustices, and emotional turning points many people face in real life. But all characters, companies, and events are entirely fictional. Our goal is to explore how one woman finds her voice, confronts betrayal, and rebuilds her sense of worth in a world that often overlooks those who stay silent the longest. The phone rang again before the sun finished rising over the rooftops. I had barely pulled myself out of bed when Richard's name flashed across the screen for the second time. No text, no explanation, just the call. I answered on the third ring. "Alara," he said, his breath uneven. "I need the audit files for the Halden tech expansion. All versions, every draft. Send them to me immediately." There was no apology in his voice. Not even a pause where one might fit, only urgency, sharp and unsteady. "You're calling early," I said. "After last night, I expected something else." "I do not have time for that," he snapped. "I need the files, the entire audit package, now." His tone tried to reclaim authority, but the tremor underneath it betrayed him. I had worked beside this man for 12 years. I knew what his calm sounded like. This was not it. "What changed overnight?" I asked. "You threw me out of a wedding. And now you're calling before dawn demanding documents." I said I do not have time. He repeated, louder. "Just send them." I walked to the kitchen counter and braced my hand against it. "Richard, those files contain flagged expenses, vendor payments, transfers routed through your son's planning company. They are not something I can just hand over without context." A long silence followed. "Not the thoughtful kind, the dangerous kind. You will send me the files," he said finally. No commentary, no questions. "There are irregularities," I said quietly. "You know that." His breath hitched, just once. "But enough. Listen to me. Alara, those files stay between us unless I say otherwise. Do you understand?" There it was, the fear he had tried to mask all night yesterday, now fully exposed. "I will review my copies," I said, "and I will decide what happens next." "Alara," his voice cracked, but I ended the call before he could finish. I stood alone in the silence of my apartment, the truth humming beneath everything. The wedding had never been about me. It had been about what I knew, what hid inside that financial trail that a man like Richard would burn his own dignity to keep buried. I opened the audit files with the intention of skimming them. Just enough to understand why Richard sounded like a man whose world had begun to tilt. But the moment the spreadsheets loaded, something in my chest tightened. The first irregularity stared back at me like an accusation. undocumented vendor payments, redirected budget lines that bypass standard approval, a transfer of more than $100,000 routed to Rowan Halden under the label Creative Consulting. I whispered the words aloud. Creative Consulting. Rowan had once bragged to me that he never read a full financial report in his life. He ran an event planning company that barely broke even most years. And now there it was, clear as ink on paper, company money feeding directly into his accounts. I clicked deeper into the trail. Each line revealed another gap, another missing signature, another quiet diversion from legitimate budgets. It was a pattern, not an accident. A pattern written in numbers that could not lie. A notification pinged on my screen. Incoming call. Richard Halden. I ignored it and kept scrolling. My voice trembled without meaning to. So this is what you needed hidden. Another call alert. Then a text. Send me the files. Alara? Now. I closed my eyes. 12 years of loyalty. And this was the truth underneath it all. It finally explained the sharpness in Richard's voice at the wedding. The way Rowan refused to meet my eyes. The way Richard shoved me out as if my presence alone threatened everything. I called up the timestamp logs. These transfers stretched back months, possibly longer, enough to trigger federal oversight if anyone outside the company saw the pattern. My phone vibrated again. Alara? Richard's voicemail began, shakier than before. Do not open anything else. We will talk. But I already had. And now that I knew, every line in those files had become a threat to him. What he planned to do next was no longer a mystery. It was an inevitability. I closed my laptop and sat back, letting the weight of 12 years settle over me like dust I had ignored too long. Every late night, every crisis patched at the last second, every spreadsheet rebuilt because someone else cut corners. Richard had trusted me with all of it, trusted me to fix, to smooth over, to stay quiet. Your work keeps this place running, he once told me. You're the calm in the storm. Back then, I thought it was gratitude. Now I heard it for what it had been, a request to never question the storm he created. My phone rang again. I let it ring. A different memory rose, Rowan leaning against my office door 2 years earlier, waving a stack of receipts. Just push these through, he had said. My father already approved it. He always said that. And I had always pushed back. Rowan, these are personal expenses. I had told him then. They cannot go through Halden Tech. His smile had been tight. You make things difficult. Alara, yesterday at the wedding, he would not look at me. Now I understood why. My silence had once protected him. Today, it threatened everything he had built on other people's money. My phone buzzed with a new message. Richard, we need to talk. Immediately. Do not involve anyone else. I typed back slowly. I am reviewing the files. I will reach out when necessary. His response arrived in seconds. This is not optional. You owe me professionalism, 12 years of carrying his mistakes, 12 years of absorbing every misplaced anger, every condescending instruction, every whispered reminder to be discreet. For so long, I mistook that quiet for respect. It was not. It was convenience. I set the phone down. He expected silence again, expected me to fall in line, expected fear. But I finally understood that silence had been hurting me more than any noise he could make. And Richard Halden did not handle losing control well, not when the woman holding it knew exactly how vulnerable he truly was. By mid-morning, Richard had called 4 times, each one more frantic than the last. On the 5th, I finally answered. Alara, he said, out of breath. The investors arrive in Boulder this afternoon. I need the audit files before the meeting. You keep saying that, I replied. But you have not explained why. I do not owe you explanations, he snapped. I need the files. Send them. I opened my laptop and logged into the system. Overnight, the compliance software had flagged suspicious attempts to access restricted directories. The automated audit trail showed multiple failed logins under Richard's credentials. His entire clearance level now displayed a single notice. Access revoked pending review. I stayed quiet long enough for him to hear me exhale. Alara, he said again, forward everything immediately. Do not delay this. You tried to open restricted folders last night, I said more than once. That is not your concern. It is when the system locks you out. He went silent, long enough that I imagined him realizing, in real time, that he had lost the one thing he believed he controlled. "What do you mean, locks me out?" he asked, voice lower, unsteady. "Your clearance was automatically suspended," I said. "As of this morning, I am the only authorized custodian of the audit files." A sharp breath hit the receiver. "Restore my access. I cannot—" "Alara," he barked. "Restore it now." I let the tension settle before I spoke the words he would never forget. "You no longer have access." The silence that followed was different this time. Not outrage, not impatience. Fear. "Alara, listen to me," he said, softer. "You do not understand the position we are in." "No." I answered. "I understand it perfectly." His breathing grew louder, ragged at the edges, as if the walls he once controlled had finally begun to close in, and he knew exactly who was standing on the other side of them. The email arrived just after noon. Not from Richard, not from Rowan, from the Halden Tech Board of Directors. "Alara, we request a confidential meeting regarding recent audit system alerts. Please come to the downtown office at 3 o'clock. No explanation, no context, just a summons." I forwarded nothing to Richard. He called once, twice, then again. But I let each call fade into silence. If the wind had begun to shift, I needed to see where it carried me before he tried to drag me back. At 3 o'clock sharp, I sat across from 4 board members in a glass-walled conference room. These were people who rarely involved themselves in day-to-day affairs unless something significant had cracked beneath the surface. "Ms. Whitford," one of them began, folding her hands. "The system flagged multiple unauthorized attempts to access restricted audit files. We also saw anomalies within the files themselves. We need clarity." I opened my folder and placed the printed summaries on the table. "These discrepancies span several months," I said. "They include undocumented vendor payments, redirected budgets, and more than $100,000 routed to Rowan Halden under a non-existent consulting category." They scanned the pages in stunned quiet. Another member leaned forward. "You are certain these figures are accurate?" "Yes," I said. "They are derived directly from the company's ledger and expenditure logs." "What about Richard?" someone else asked. "Was he aware of these transfers?" I kept my voice even. "He asked me this morning to send him the complete audit files privately." A long, heavy pause filled the room. Richard Halden had once controlled every corner of this company with practiced authority. Today, he was not even in the room. Today, his name hovered like a shadow slipping from a wall. One board member finally exhaled. "Ms. Whitford, it appears we are no longer looking at clerical errors. We are looking at fraud." Their expressions shifted from surprise to resolve, and I understood that Richard was no longer the man demanding answers. He was the man they intended to question next. The investigators moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, they had traced a sequence of payments that left no room for interpretation. The money had flowed straight from Halden Tech's operating budget into Rowan Halden's event planning company, and from there into deposits for the wedding venue, catering, and entertainment. When they called me back to the downtown office, I sat in the same chair as before. This time, the board members' faces were tighter, their voices clipped. One of them tapped the paperwork. "Ms. Whitford, this confirms the expenses tied directly to the wedding." Rowan approved the transfers with his own credentials. Another added. And Richard signed off on the categorical reclassifications. He hid them under expansion costs. I kept my voice steady. "Those codes were never part of the approved budget." "We know," the first one said. "And now the investigators know?" The door opened. Richard stepped inside, flanked by 2 compliance officers. His eyes swept the room, then landed on me. Something inside them flickered anger, shock, and a kind of disbelief that I was sitting while he was standing. "What is this?" he demanded. "You are making a mistake. This is a misunderstanding." A board member held up a hand. "Richard, you are being placed on immediate leave, pending investigation. You cannot do that," he barked. "You need me here. You do not understand the damage she has caused." "This is not about her," another member cut in. "This is about the evidence." A second door opened. Rowan appeared, pale and furious, gripping a folded letter. A compliance officer handed him an official notice. "This is ridiculous," Rowan snapped. "Those expenses were authorized." "No," one of the investigators said. "They were concealed." Richard turned toward me, voice low, almost a growl. You did this. I met his stare without blinking. I told the truth. His jaw tightened as the officers escorted him and his son out. And I knew exactly what came next. A man losing everything rarely went quietly. Richard called the moment the investigators stepped away from him. I let the first call ring out, the second, the third. On the fourth, I picked up. His voice was no longer sharp. It slithered. Alara, you have misunderstood the data. Those transfers were standard. You are overreacting. I read every entry. I said, nothing about them was standard. You are not seeing the full context, he insisted. If you retract your statements, we can correct the report internally. There is nothing to retract, he paused, then softened his tone into something meant to sound reasonable. Alara, think carefully. These discrepancies happened under your watch. If this goes public, you could be held accountable too. So that was his angle, shove the guilt in my direction. Smother me with the same quiet compliance he had relied on for 12 years. I kept my voice calm. The audit logs hold timestamps, signature trails, and authorization records. Every transfer shows who approved it. That documentation is already secured. Richard's composure cracked. You think the board will support you once this spirals. You think Denver regulators will not question how you let this happen. I did not let it happen, I said. I exposed it. A harsh breath hissed through the line. You are making a mistake. You cannot win this. This is not a contest. Richard, I answered. It is a deposition. Mine is scheduled for tomorrow. He dropped his voice to a whisper, meant to intimidate. You do not know what you are risking. I know exactly what I am refusing, I said. I will not rewrite the truth to protect you. Silence followed long enough that I heard the sound of him realizing he had run out of leverage. I ended the call, opened my laptop, and continued preparing my deposition. Every document, every log, every line of evidence laid out clearly. The fear he counted on no longer lived in me. And there was one final chain I was ready to break, even if he never saw it coming. The board reconvened 1 week later. I sat in the same chair, hands folded, breathing evenly. This time, the tension in the room did not belong to me. A senior board member cleared his throat. Ms. Whitford, the investigation is complete. Richard Halden has been permanently removed from his position. He will not return to Halden Tech in any capacity. No one looked surprised. Not after what they had uncovered. Another member spoke next. As for Rowan, his actions meet the criteria for corporate misconduct. Legal counsel has been notified. He will face both corporate and criminal review. I exhaled slowly, not out of relief, but out of something quieter recognition. The truth had landed exactly where it needed to. Then the chairwoman leaned forward. Alara, your testimony and documentation were decisive. We would like to offer you the position of interim chief auditor. The role comes with full authority over compliance operations. Richard had once said I was the calm in the storm. Now the storm was gone, and I was being asked to steer the ship he left behind. I met the chairwoman's eyes. I appreciate the offer, truly, but I will not be accepting. A ripple of surprise moved around the table. May we ask why? She said gently. I spent 12 years fixing problems that should never have existed, I replied. I will not rebuild a structure that taught me silence was part of the job. They nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. I have accepted a position with Meridian Analytics, I continued. They reached out after reviewing the investigator's report. The board exchanged glances. Meridian was a direct competitor, respected, stable. A place where integrity meant something. The chairwoman offered a small smile. Then we wish you every success. I stood, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. I had no desire for power over the ruins Richard left behind. I finally had something better: freedom. And there was one final truth I needed to say before this chapter could close. I was packing the last of my things into a single box when my phone lit up. Richard Halden. For a moment, I just watched it ring. The man who once barked orders across entire departments now sounded like someone who had forgotten how to speak with conviction. I answered. Alara? He exhaled shakily. I heard you left. Meridian Analytics, after everything we built. You built your version of it, I said. I built mine. He hesitated. I did not call to argue. I wanted to talk. Without lawyers. Without board members listening. Just you and me. You lost that privilege, I said. His voice thinned. I did not mean for things to end like this. I lost my temper at the wedding. I made decisions I regret. I thought his breath caught. Maybe if you understood my position, you might offer some forgiveness. You humiliated me in front of more than 100 people, I said. And the next morning, you asked for the files that would hide what you and your son had done. You did not want forgiveness. Richard, you wanted protection. That is not fair, he muttered. It is the truth. He swallowed audibly. I do not know how to fix this. I am not asking you to. Silence stretched between us longer than any command he had ever thrown my way. Alara, what do you need from me? He asked quietly. Nothing, I said. I never needed your approval. I only needed my freedom. He drew in a weak breath, the kind a man gives when he realizes every piece of authority he once held has slipped through his fingers. I see, he whispered. Then I suppose this is goodbye. It is, I said. I ended the call, placed my phone on the counter, and closed the box. When I walked out of my apartment and into the crisp Denver air, something inside me felt steady for the first time in years. Life lesson. It took losing a job, a mentor, and 12 years of misguided loyalty to learn that dignity is not something someone else can give you. It is something you reclaim the moment you stop letting fear dictate your silence. Sometimes justice does not roar, it simply removes itself from the people who believed you could not live without them. The morning they tried to erase me began with a single blink of red light on my badge reader. A light I had never seen in more than 11 years at Hallstrom Analytics. I pressed the card again, slower this time, as if gentleness might change the truth. The reader flashed red once more. Behind the desk, the security guard, Marcus, shifted awkwardly. He knew me, everyone knew me, but he kept his gaze on the floor. That was the moment I realized something had been decided without me. My phone vibrated before I could say a word. Althea, Clayton Reeves said, his voice smooth and warm in the way people sound when they have already practiced a speech. I forgot to tell you, but it is not too late. You are fired. There was no pause, no breath, not even a fake apology. The line went dead. For a moment, I simply stood there, badge in hand, feeling the weight of an old fear I thought I had buried years ago. It rose fast, sharp, familiar. I swallowed it down and walked away from the entrance without speaking to anyone. I did not need a meeting. I did not need a written notice. His tone had told me everything. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from my attorney, David Marlowe, in his cramped office above a used bookstore on East 4th Street. I had not planned to come here. My feet had carried me before my mind even caught up. I placed the sealed folder on his desk, the one I had kept hidden since the earliest days of Hallstrom, back when the company was nothing more than a rented basement and a desperate idea. David opened the folder, scanned the first 3 lines, and stopped breathing for half a second. His head lifted slowly. Althea, he said, voice low and steady. You kept this for 11 years sometimes, I replied, folding my hands to keep them from shaking. You prepare for a betrayal long before it arrives. And with that, the long-hidden truth I had tried not to need began to move toward the light, carrying everything that would come next. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. Every tale carries its own message, its own heartbeat, and this one belongs solely to Althea's fight to reclaim what was taken from her. I joined Hallstrom Analytics when it was nothing more than 6 exhausted employees, 1 creaky server, and a rented basement that smelled like dust and old carpet glue. On my first day, the founder, Jonah Hallstrom, handed me a stack of mismatched binders and said, if we do not fix our compliance protocols this month, investors will walk. I remember answering, then we will fix them, even though I had no idea how I would pull it off. But I did. I stayed late, built frameworks from scratch, rewrote every policy they had scribbled on whiteboards, and learned that a company without structure behaves like a frightened animal, fast, unpredictable, and always one mistake away from collapse. During the first audit, when everything began to fall apart, Jonah pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. Althea, can you salvage this? I will, I told him, and I meant it. By morning, the crisis was contained, and Hallstrom had a future again. Months became years, investor chaos, acquisitions, and sudden leadership shifts swept through us. But I stayed. When my sister had emergency surgery, I worked from the hospital waiting room. When Charlotte lost power during a winter storm, I wrapped myself in a coat and finished a report by flashlight. When my doctor urged me to schedule my own procedure, I delayed it 3 times for the good of the company. People thanked me with hurried smiles and thin compliments. Promises of raises after the next quarter. Promotions postponed because your role is too essential to move right now. I believed them every time. I believed patience would turn into respect. That loyalty would eventually mean something. During one late-night meeting, Jonah clasped my shoulder. "You are the backbone here, Althea. One day we will make that official." I nodded, letting myself imagine that future. It never came. 11 years passed, and the place I held together so tightly slowly loosened its grip on me, until one morning it let go completely. Clayton Reeves arrived at Hallstrom with the confidence of someone who believed success was a performance, not a responsibility. During his first town hall, he spoke about hypergrowth, market domination, and rewriting the industry's rules. The shift was immediate. What had once been a company built on restraint and integrity now revolved around speed, flash, and endless promises. At first, he treated me like a valuable relic from the early days. "Althea," he said during his first week, "you are the person everyone respects. I need you close." But the invitations to meetings began to thin. One afternoon, I approached his office door just as he stepped out. "Clayton, I did not get the agenda for the risk review." His smile was smooth. "Oh, that one is smaller now. I handled it with the product team. I am the compliance lead," I reminded him. "Yes, which is why you should focus on stability, not the distractions," he replied, already walking away. The first numbers that did not make sense appeared a month later. Discrepancies that usually required days of investigation were suddenly gone. Client churn dropped to 0. Revenue climbed in impossible jumps, even though we had not added a single major contract. During a late evening in the analytics room, a junior analyst named Priya leaned toward me, voice barely above a whisper. "Someone is rewriting the metrics," she said. "I saw an edit timestamp that does not match any user in the department." "Show me," I said. She opened the file. And when I tried to access the audit trail, I received a message I had never seen before: permission denied. I tried again, slower, convinced it had to be a glitch. The same message appeared. Priya looked at me with quiet dread. "You were locked out, Althea. They locked out the one person who knows what the real numbers should be." I stood there with my hand still on the mouse, feeling the first hairline crack in something I thought could not break. The next morning, I attempted to open the audit trail module I had personally built during Hallstrom's early years. It had never failed, not once. Yet the screen displayed a message I had never designed: access revoked. I tried another module. The same message appeared. I walked straight to IT. "Evan," the lead tech, avoided my eyes as soon as he saw me. "Evan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Why are my permissions blocked?" He tapped nervously on his keyboard. "It is part of the software migration, Althea, temporary. Clayton asked us to streamline roles. That is not how migrations work," I replied. "I know," he whispered. But I was told this was above my level. Before I could press further, Clayton entered the room with the confident stride of a man who believed he owned every square foot he walked on. "Good news," he announced. "We are bringing in a consulting partner to optimize our data flow. Nova Metrics, cutting edge, fast." I asked, "Who are they?" He gave me a shallow smile. "They are specialists. You will meet them when necessary." No one met them. No one ever saw them. The name appeared only on internal memos and contract sheets. No website. No staff list. No corporate registration in North Carolina. That night, I returned to the office to finish a report. The building was silent. I logged in, opened the system log, and watched as a line of activity scrolled across the screen, time-stamped at an hour when no employee had been in the building. Unauthorized edits, hidden rewrites, new values replacing old ones in the blink of an eye. I leaned closer, pulse tight, and took screenshots of everything, acting on instinct, not strategy. Someone had found a way into Hallstrom's core data, someone who did not want me anywhere near it. By the start of the next week, the atmosphere around me had shifted into something I could not name but immediately recognized. HR called me in for a brief alignment discussion, a phrase that never meant anything good. The manager, a woman I barely knew, folded her hands neatly and said, "Althea, Your role may not be fully aligned with the new direction the company is pursuing. What direction is that? I asked. She blinked as if the question itself was inconvenient. It is still being defined. But leadership feels your current responsibilities are transitional. Define transitional, I said. She glanced toward the door. I am not authorized to elaborate. Later that afternoon, I discovered that a new hire, someone straight out of business school, name tag still shiny, had been assigned one of the core processes I had built myself. He approached me timidly. Clayton said you would brief me, he murmured. Brief you on what? On taking over the compliance workflow. I stared at him, seeing the embarrassment in his eyes. You did nothing wrong, I said quietly. You were handed someone else's work. I walked straight to Clayton's office. He was already smiling when I entered, as though he had been waiting to play a part he enjoyed. Clayton, why was my workflow reassigned? He leaned back. Do not worry. Althea, some people outgrow their usefulness. It happens in every company. The words landed like a slap delivered softly. Deliberately, I felt heat rise in my chest. You are making a mistake, I said. He shrugged. Mistakes are reversible. Stagnation is not. I left his office with my pulse ringing in my ears. By the time I reached my car, the truth settled over me with heavy clarity. I was not being sidelined. I was being erased, quietly and efficiently, by someone who needed me out of the way. David adjusted his glasses and pulled the folder closer. I watched his expression sharpen as he flipped through the first few pages, the same pages I had avoided reading for years, because they carried a weight I was never sure I wanted to hold. This, he murmured, tapping the top sheet, is a co-founder contract. I was never listed publicly. I said. Jonah insisted anonymity would protect me from early investor backlash. David nodded slowly. Hallstrom was nothing back then. 6 people and 1 failing server, I added. I never imagined the paperwork would matter. He turned to the second document. The shift in his posture was immediate. This clause, he said, sliding the page toward me, grants you partial intellectual property rights to the compliance engine, the one Hallstrom built its reputation on, I answered quietly. I drafted the first version. Jonah said it was temporary. He said we would formalize ownership later. And then Clayton arrived. David said, and later disappeared. He picked up another page, one I had not seen in years. These are the revision logs from the internal archive. It looks like someone tried to delete your early contributions. I felt a faint tremor move up my arms. Clayton started rewriting history the moment Jonah stepped down. I whispered. David looked at me, the softness leaving his voice. If these documents hold up, Clayton did not just fire you. He stole from you. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of the air vent, the kind of silence that follows a truth too large to grasp all at once. David closed the folder gently, as if the contents might shatter. Althea, this is not just leverage. This is ownership. I exhaled slowly, feeling the first outline of a path I had never intended to take begin to form in front of me. Fueled not by revenge alone, but by a truth Clayton never expected to face. David spread the documents across his desk, arranging them like pieces of a long-hidden puzzle, finally coming into view. We start by filing your intellectual property claim, he said. Once that is in motion, any attempt by Hallstrom to use or modify the compliance engine becomes legally questionable. I nodded. My hands were steady now, steadier than they had been in days. Next, he continued. We report the financial misrepresentation. State authorities take data manipulation seriously, especially when a company is preparing to go public. So Clayton's timeline collapses. I said. Collapses, David repeated, and burns. He pulled out a draft email. This goes to the board, anonymous, clean, direct. They will not know it is you. But they will know someone inside understands exactly what Clayton has been hiding. I read the lines simple, factual, pointed. Send it. I said. David leaned back. You realize every step we take is legal, and every step will hit him harder than the last. That is the point, I answered. He erased my access, my work, my history. Now the truth can erase his plans. While he prepared the filings, I stepped into the hallway to catch my breath. My phone buzzed with a new message, an unfamiliar number. Althea, they fired you to bury the data. I have something you need to see. I stared at the text. The sender's name appeared beneath it, Ethan. a former intern who had barely spoken during meetings and always kept to the edges of the room, unnoticed by most people, including Clayton. Another message arrived a moment later. I saved a recording from the night he ordered the alterations. I did not know who else to trust. I felt a slow, controlled surge of heat rise in my chest. Not anger, not fear. Validation. The first outside confirmation of what Clayton had tried to hide. Ethan arrived at David's office with the nervous energy of someone who had rehearsed the moment in his head, but never believed he would go through with it. He sat down, opened his laptop, and pressed play. Clayton's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate, unmistakably his. I do not care what the numbers actually are, he said in the recording. Rewrite them. By morning, they need to show growth. Nova Metrics will cover the back end. A second voice hesitated, but compliance will not see it. Clayton cut in. Althea's access is already being handled. Ethan closed the laptop, hands trembling. I saved it the night it happened, he said quietly. I knew someone would get hurt, but I did not think it would be you. You did the right thing, I told him. He nodded once, relief fighting fear in his expression. David wasted no time. The folder, the co-founder contract, the intellectual property clause, the archive deletion logs, and the recording, all of it was packaged and sent to Hallstrom's board and the state regulators. No introduction, no commentary, just truth delivered with surgical precision. 2 hours later, David's phone lit up with a message from a board liaison. Emergency session convened. Clayton ordered to appear immediately. By early afternoon, word filtered back through quiet channels. Clayton had tried to keep his composure as the board questioned him. He blamed Nova Metrics. He blamed miscommunication. He blamed technical noise. The chairwoman interrupted him mid-sentence. We checked. Nova Metrics exists only on paper. No staff, no operations, no filings. Silence followed, sharp and heavy. Then someone pushed the folder across the table toward him. The same folder he had tried to erase from Hallstrom's history. In that instant, Clayton understood he had never deleted the one thing that could destroy him. Althea. The fallout moved faster than I expected. By mid-morning the next day, David received confirmation that the board had voted unanimously to suspend Clayton pending a full internal review. The suspension was immediate and public. No quiet exit, no graceful statement, just a single line delivered to every employee inbox. By noon, regulators announced a formal inquiry into Hallstrom's reporting practices. David read the notice aloud. They are not treating this as a clerical issue, he said. They are treating it as intentional manipulation. I let the words settle. I had known the truth for weeks, but hearing it spoken by authorities gave it a weight that even I had not anticipated. An hour later, the first investor email leaked across internal channels. The largest early-stage fund had withdrawn completely. Without them, Hallstrom's planned initial public offering froze in place, its valuation evaporating in the space of a single afternoon. Clayton tried to enter the building around 3 o'clock. A former colleague sent me a text describing what happened. He looked calm at first, she wrote. Then he scanned his badge and the reader flashed red. Marcus, the same guard who had watched me struggle at the door the morning they fired me, stepped forward. Your access has been disabled. Mr. Reeves, he told him. Clayton's voice sharpened. There must be a mistake. An HR representative approached, holding a sealed envelope. There is no mistake. You are not authorized to enter the premises. The identical sentence he had once used as a weapon against me now echoed back at him, delivered with the same emptiness he had perfected over the years. He stood outside the building, badge in hand, stunned into silence. The same door that had rejected me now rejected him. And for the first time since this began, the imbalance between us leveled not with triumph, but with finality. Hallstrom reached out 2 weeks after Clayton's suspension, asking whether I intended to return in any capacity. I read the email twice, then deleted it. I had spent 11 years building a place that never belonged to me, and I was done lending my life to anyone else's ambition. David arranged a meeting with their legal team. They came prepared with polished smiles and softened tones, but the document they handed over mattered more than any apology they attempted. This settlement grants you full ownership of the audit integrity engine, one attorney said. I ran my fingers along the signature line. I wrote the framework. I replied, it is only right the framework comes home. I signed without hesitation. With the settlement finalized, I realized I wanted something different from revenge or victory. I wanted impact, the kind that protected people who never had a voice when their careers were taken from them. So I rented a modest office space in Charlotte and filed paperwork to launch a nonprofit dedicated to supporting workers who had been wrongfully dismissed during corporate restructuring. It felt strange at first, stepping into a space where I was not fighting to be heard. I was shaping something entirely my own. On the nonprofit's first morning, a small envelope arrived in the mailroom. No name, no return address. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a handwritten note that said only, "For the people who refuse to be erased." I stood there holding the note, letting its weight settle into me. Clayton's downfall was never the victory. This building something that lifted others instead of being consumed by the machinery of corporate ambition was the life I had been owed all along. And if there is a lesson I carried from those 11 years, it is this. The moment you stop waiting to be valued by others is the moment you begin to build a future worthy of your strength.